Ladies and gentlemen, we will be going to our next part of our evening. And I would like to welcome our chairman, Gabriel Sara, and our guest speaker, Joe Saddi.
Okay, good evening, everyone. We were very, very honored tonight to have Joe, who is here with us, who traveled from Beirut to join us. His name has come up several times because every year we sit down and we look at who we're going to invite, and we have a lot of competing names, and we're finally happy to have him come here. And I didn't know Joe from before, but like almost always with the Jamhourian, you meet them one time after not knowing them at all, and it's like you've been with them forever. So we met yesterday for the first time, and I felt that he's an old friend from 30, 40 years ago. It was instant, and that's what is amazing and magic with the anciens of any school. So I'm presenting you my friend Joe today, and I think everybody knows more or less what Joe's history is as far as his professional life, and I would not be able to talk about it. It's too much for me. But we're going to sit down and have a conversation with him, get to know who he is as a person, and then, of course, you'll have the floor open for all the questions you want, and he told me he'll answer any question. So, welcome, Joe.
Thank you, Gabriel.
So, Joe, we always start by saying, when you were in school, like all of us, some knew what they wanted, some had no idea, some had some crazy dreams that happened or didn't. So, what were you thinking when you were a kid in Jamhour?
I had absolutely no idea, Gabi, what I would be doing in the future. So all I wanted to do is, go out and study abroad. I am of the class of '76, so it was right at the time of the start of the Civil War. So I ended up going to France, did my undergrad there, then did my MBA in the US. And then, frankly, by accident, almost became a consultant. And I've been a consultant all my life. I had this 1 year stint in New York in a bank, but then quickly, in '86, started in Paris, and then for me it was a career that I discovered and loved, and very few people in consulting, do it as a lifetime career. Most people go in consulting and spend a few years and then move on to something else. But for me, it was like a calling, and I just loved it and still love every second of it. But back in school, I had no idea, frankly, what I would be doing.
Wonderful. Yeah. So clearly your passion for this got you to rise very quickly to very, very high positions. So just for all of us, especially for the young people here who are young students or young graduates, give us a bit your journey from your graduation to the positions you have.
So after I finished my studies, I started as a consultant in Paris with a company called Bain & Company. And for 7 years, spent a third of my time in France, a third in Turkey, and a third in Boston. And from then I took the habit of, traveling and not being in a single place more than 3 or 4 days in a row. And in 1993, with actually an alumni of Jamhour, a friend of mine called Charles Haj, who was a class of 1975, we both left France to open up an office in Abu Dhabi. And that was the first office of any major consulting firm in the world in the Middle East. And back then, when we started, people looked at us and said, "Who are these guys coming to tell us what to do and asking for big checks and big pays?" And it was quite tough in the beginning. But after a few years, we established the brand and, frankly, the trade of being a consultant in the Middle East. And in 2000, I took the decision to relocate from Abu Dhabi to Beirut, opened the Beirut office, and made Beirut our regional headquarters for the region. And in 2005, Beirut became an office larger than the one that we have in New York. And the model that we used was very simple. The way we, frankly, fueled that growth was to tell Lebanese students in particular, come back from abroad. We recruited from the likes of Harvard, Columbia, Wharton, NYU, Chicago, Stanford, etc., but also in Europe, and told them, come back and work be based in Lebanon, work in the Middle East, and you'll be treated exactly the same way as if you were sitting in London or in New York, salary-wise, compensation-wise, and so on. And that helped us attract a lot of Lebanese back to the country who otherwise would have gone somewhere else. And we stayed, and Beirut stayed our major headquarters for the region throughout the period. So the 2006 war, my partners here in Washington would used to tell me, you guys are crazy to still be in Lebanon. What the hell are you doing there? We kept our office there. 2008, there was another major incident in May, if you remember, and again we stayed throughout the period. And then in 2008, we sold part of our company to Carlyle, a big private equity group in the US. We sold the part that did consulting to the US federal government. And the part that I was in, traditional management consulting, became headquartered in New York, and I became the global chairman. So I ended 2014, shuttling back and forth between Beirut and New York to the tune of twice a month for one day. So for 6 years, I did, the commute between Beirut, and again, at the time, I did not want to leave Lebanon. I was asked to relocate to New York, and I refused. Like all of us, we're quite attached to our country, for right or wrong. But and I stayed in this position of global chairman until 2014, when we sold the company to PwC and became an autonomous company within PwC. Since then, I've refocused my time on the Middle East, became chairman of the Middle East, and I just retired, in fact, a few months ago. And I still act as a senior advisor to our large clients, mainly in Saudi Arabia and in the UAE. But now I work for 2 days a week. Monday, Tuesday, I'm somewhere in the region. And the rest of the time, I'm doing my own things.
Amazing. I'm impressed how you're able to convince the Middle East countries of the role of consulting. They probably look at you like some crazy guy coming over, giving us your opinion. And how are you able? Do you have any difficult or funny stories that will be
Listen, at the beginning, business, and so it was very tough in the beginning, and the way we navigated through it was, frankly, to just give out our services for free at the beginning. Tell them, you should try us, and you'll see. And it picked up. It picked up quite nicely. What made the difference was that rather than in what many other companies did, rather than bring expatriates to the region as part of our team, we decided to rely mainly on Lebanese, but also some other Arab nationalities. And so the cultural rapport between us and our clients really helped a lot gain credibility, because they felt we understood them and had personal relationships that endure until now. There are plenty of funny stories. I'm often asked that, when I go do campus presentations, I'm asked that question.
So I'm sure that in this amazing career that you have, which really you became a star very quickly, you've had, maybe you did, like all of us do, some breakdowns, some really tough moment where things were all just against you, or you made a mistake somewhere. If you had any, would you share a little bit about it and how you came out of it when it happened, if it did happen?
No, the toughest time we've had was, frankly, 2006, when the war broke in Lebanon, and we had to make a decision. We were being pressured by our partners around the world to, get out, leave Lebanon, and that's it. On top of it, we had the responsibility. Our whole back office is in Lebanon, so we're recruiting, accounting, training, etc. They were based in Beirut, and that was very tough to decide, whether you take the responsibility to tell those people stay there despite the war, or not. And at the same time, we had a duty to our clients to keep working with them. So we really had to evacuate the consultants to make sure that they, very quickly be operational, in the countries where they were working. We had to relocate our back office within 48 hours The back office was relocated partly in Fareya, for those of you who know Fareya, in the Intercontinental Mzar, and the other part was in the Grand Hotel in Brumana. Forgot what the name is.
Bustan
No,
maybe?
no. Yeah.
The Pratanya.
Yeah, and so we had part of our stuff in Brumana, part of our stuff in Fareya, and we had to make that work for 3 months. But the responsibility that we felt to our staff who had to stay there was quite tiring. And the second tough part of this whole period was the burning of my office in 2005. I don't know if you guys remember. In 2005, there was the Denmark famous incident. And a bunch of people decided to come into Ashrafieh and burn the Danish embassy. It turned out that the Danish ambassador had his office right above my office. And so they came into the building, they mistook my office for that of the ambassador, and our whole office was burnt. And in my office in particular, because they thought that was the office of the ambassador, I had all sorts of insults, written, but the whole office was completely burnt. And we had to restart from scratch. Fortunately, our records are all computerized, stored, duplicated, and so on. But we had to relocate within days into a new office and make sense of everything that has happened. So these were, quite interesting moments of, being based in Lebanon.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I know that you have not been able to implement any of your consultant skills in the government.
No.
But
I confess to it.
But I know that you've now been very active in the Amical of Lebanon, of Jamhour. And you were telling me, all these things that are changing, and I was like incredibly pleased to see that change, because we've been waiting for a long time to have a new restructuration of it. So actually, there was a new app that when was it launched? A few months ago?
Yes. The app was launched.
Can you put the app on the screen?
3 or 4 months ago. I really encourage everyone to download the app. It's great. It's you can see it there. It's a great way to keep in touch, to remember who is who in your particular class, to get information on the activities of the Amical, and also of paying the yearly dues. But maybe if you allow me,
Gabby, tell us about what's going on, what's happening in the Amical now.
Let me start with why I have chosen to get involved with Jamhour again. For 2 reasons mainly. The first one is, frankly, for those of us who've chosen to stay in Lebanon, we would not have chosen to stay in Lebanon were it not for the fact that you still have high-quality private schools like Jamhour. If there was no high-quality education in Jamhour, I can tell you, many families would just leave. I'd be the first one to leave. Despite all the love that we have for the country, I would not be there. So education and culture, but education mainly, is still the reason why some of us have chosen to have our children there, and we've got to protect it. And it is under duress, and it is under stress and under attack, for all the reasons that Pirbat mentioned earlier. The second reason is I feel I owe Jamhour a lot. I mean, it may be cliche, but the discipline, the work ethics, the rigor, so on and so forth. I could go on, but brought me a lot in my professional life. So I feel I owe Jamhour a lot in what I've done. So what we're doing right now is, as far as the Amical is concerned, we have, with the new group that's been elected a year ago, we are now, frankly, modernizing the Amical and making it an institution that will endure beyond any of us. Okay? So we are reviewing the bylaws. On est en train de moderniser les statuts de l'Amical. We are bringing it into the 21st century. We have, put in place processes, policies, budgets, and what have you. And we've brought technology into the game as well. And again, I encourage you once more to download the app. So a lot of work is going on right now to try to institutionalize the Amical so that it's not dependent on any single person, but frankly, is an institution that will endure irrespective of who is there. The second thing that we've done with very closely also working with Per Sherbel, Per Dalmé, and Per Denis is with respect to the Mutuelle des Bourses Scolaires. Again, we've modernized the way we're thinking about running it. We've put in much more transparency now into the amounts that have been gathered, how they're being spent, where they are directed, and so on. So we're doing exactly the same kind of work with respect to the Mutuelle. And thirdly, and maybe most importantly, and Per Sherbel alluded to it earlier, we have, with a working group and under the leadership of Per Batour, we've put in place an idea that has been around for quite some time, but now it is ready to be launched, the endowment fund, le fonds de dotation. And basically what we've done is, we've put in place, a very modern governance for the fonds de dotation with a board of trustees, a committee that will oversee how this money will be invested for the benefit of the fund. We've put in place a fundraising committee. We've put in place a committee that will develop projects for Jamhour to be financed. And the idea is, after it's announced, we will hit the road and ask donors, via different ways of basically selecting what they want to contribute for. So those of us who prefer to contribute to scholarships will do so. If they give money, their wishes will be respected. The money will go to scholarships. Those who want to finance specific projects, someone may may say, I want to finance the sports stadium modernization. So there is a list of projects being developed for donors to say, well, I prefer to fund a particular project, and they will have their pick. And the third category will be people who will say, I just want to give money to the endowment fund, and you guys benefit from the interests or the proceeds from this fund for the general needs of the school. So basically the idea is to fully respect the wishes of the donors. It will be fully transparent. We're hiring one of the big four to audit the accounts, and there'll be a yearly report on how the funds were received, how much was used, for what purpose were used. We're copying, basically, we're not reinventing the wheel, we're copying how the best institutions in the US, in fact, govern endowment funds. And I think we will be announcing it in the coming month or two.
Well, it's fantastic to listen to this kind of news, because all the news we hear today about Lebanon and Middle East are just horrible news, very depressing, negative, no future, and give up on Lebanon. That's what you hear all the time. And then listening to you really is refreshing to see that you are investing your time, your company into creating something fantastic and hopefully making the school survive and have a great resistance, as you say, Per Batour. So beside those projects, and I hope that every school will do something similar, because if all the private schools are able to really survive,
they have to.
We have a chance to keep this country alive. As you said, I think all of us, if there was no education in Lebanon, nobody would stay there. I think you're so right about that. I never thought about it, but this is so true. Like many people that we have gotten here in this podium, I mean, you have many sides in your life and in your person. One thing that usually you don't talk about is what you do in your generosity, basically, your philanthropy. And I know that you are involved in several institutions in Lebanon. And if you don't mind telling us about them a little bit, so people hear about these institutions that you are helping.
Again, I mean, thanks God there are all these institutions, those NGOs, those organizations that are filling a void which normally the state or a decently functioning state should have done without anyone asking. And so I'm a couple of things I'm involved in. One is that are close to, dear to my heart. One is called Himaya. It's about child prevention of child abuse. A second one is called Schoon. It's about drug prevention I mean, the drug is a big issue. We tend not to know it or not to realize it.
And talk about it. It's a taboo subject in Lebanon.
It's a taboo subject. It's a big issue. And it's a tough cause because there are so many needs out there that when you come and talk to drug prevention, you often get the reaction, well, nobody asked them to get drugged or to become addicts. Well, and you have to make people realize that it could happen to any opportunity, frankly. So that's an important one that I'm involved with. And the third one, which is part of educational and cultural resistance, is a new thing that I've gotten involved with, and largely thanks to my friends Joe and Claude Rodi, and I've been asked now to chair the board of trustees of the future Modern Art Museum of Beirut. And it's a museum that will be built on the premises near the USG. For those of you who know the Musée National in Lebanon, you have the Sûreté Générale, the General Security. You have the USG buildings there, the MIM Museum of Selim Eddeh, and there is a big parking lot over there that's land owned by USG. And so the future Museum of Modern Art for Lebanese art will be built on, USG has been generous enough to lend part of this land to this museum. And so now we have a couple of years to make sure that this museum gets built. And frankly, one would say, with everything that's going on in Lebanon, why would you bother thinking about a museum? Well, it's part of resistance. I mean, again, the two pillars or the two reasons why we're still there is first and foremost education, but also the culture that we have, and defending that culture is very important. So these are a couple of causes that I'm taking.
Tell me about Roads to Life.
Roads to Life is another one. I have to say that my company has, over the years, Booz Company has been very generous in allowing the partners to support, via time spent by the consultants, to support many causes. And another cause that our company supported was Roads for Life. Josiane, you may like this one when I talk about it. It started with a friend of mine whose son was killed in a road accident. And he died because the emergency team were not equipped and not fully trained to get there in time and to do what was necessary right there on the spot. And so this organization now basically raises funds and brings know-how from the best medical universities. I think one of them based in Chicago, to emergency response teams in Lebanon, whether they are from the army, from the police, municipalities, the emergency response teams from hospitals and so on. So they train them on the latest techniques and equip them with what is necessary.
And you're bringing some to train also here, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. I heard that you had something to do with the marathon. Is this true?
Yeah, I mean, again, Booz & Company helped do the first strategic plan and organization of the Beirut Marathon some 11 years ago. I remember the first race that I ran in, there were a couple thousand people doing it just for fun. And now it's one of the largest marathons in the region, where now May Khalil, who has spearheaded this, is exporting this know-how to other Arab countries. She's been asked to go and help stand up marathon organizations in other countries. And it is the one event, if you think about it, in Lebanon, where people from different religions, different age groups, different social groups, different regional affiliations come together. And now I think, if I'm not mistaken, the last one, almost 30,000 people participated. And the next one, if you happen to be in Beirut, is taking place on November 11th. That's 2 Sundays from now. And now it's become something that's ingrained in the culture. And 11 years ago, you didn't see people running on the Corniche and in the streets of Beirut. Now you go on a Sunday morning at 7 a.m., it's crowded. People are running, and you have this culture of running that has come to Lebanon.
Yeah, I read in Lorient that they expect 50,000 people this year.
This year maybe,
I mean, they're competing with the New York numbers.
Yeah.
No, really, this is unbelievable.
And by the way, Jamhour has a team that runs. That runs.
Okay, well, I think I can spend another 2 hours with Joe. He's so fascinating, but I need to give you also room to ask questions. We have 2 microphones here. Do we have the microphones, please? And so if you want to ask a question, raise your hand. I'll ask you to give your name, and if you are Jamhour, say what year, and go ahead. You can see that Joe answers any question in always a very generous way. So go ahead, Habib.
So yes, Jamhour 84. Joe, you don't get a lot of credit for what you guys have done with you and your partners at Booz in Beirut, but I can tell you from our vantage point in New York, some of the best young professionals that we see come to New York from Lebanon started at Jamhour, went through Booz, and landed here. So you guys really did something incredible. My question to you is, why haven't we seen more similar stories like Booz? And what is it going to take to have more of them and to get half this room to go back and actually build their careers in Lebanon?
Habib, I was dreading that question. Frankly. Listen, first of all, we did it because we believed that, first of all, it did make business sense. When we decided to hire back into Lebanon, Lebanese, as if they were working in New York or London, same salary conditions, for us it made perfect business sense for a very simple reason. When we get an expat, the expat at some point in time is going to go back home, and all the relationship capital that this expat has accumulated will evaporate. And for us, it was a good business reason. A Lebanese in Lebanon developing relationships with clients would stay there. The relationship would stay there as long as the person would be with us in the company. And secondly, would understand much more the culture of the client and be able to have an impact much better than if we're being parachuted from Mars into this client's organization. So it made business sense. That's why also, and I have to give credit to our company for believing in this program, every year since the year 2000, and even before that, but frankly it's really started in 2000, every year we sponsor 30 to 35 of our undergrad consultants into the top MBA schools in the US and in Europe, and bring them back afterwards. So you really have to believe it and believe that it makes good business sense to do it. Other firms have chosen for the region the expat model. Okay, frankly, we chose a very different way of doing it, and I think that was the main reason of our success over the years. So that's the easy part of the question. The tough part is, what would it take to have more Lebanese come back to the country? Well, until you have, I'd love to say, easy, just come and replicate what we've done. There aren't many companies who could replicate what we've done, because it's not obvious to do. Murex has done it, by the way. Murex with Selim, Maroon, and others have, I can think of them also as doing the same kind of thing that we've done. They've managed to bring back to Lebanon people under the same conditions, and give them credit for that. Lebanon today is not an easy place to attract, talent to. In fact, you have an, when I'm asked what is the, what does Lebanon export, we are the, our main export is brains. Before exporting apples or jewelry or whatever, the first thing we export is brains. Every year, if you take AUB, USG, the top, a good chunk of each class just 50, 60, 70% just leave the country. That's our main source of, our main export. Okay, and until we fix the fundamentals of the country and get it back on track and have a vibrant economy and so on, it's going to be very difficult to target. We may have a few companies that replicate what we do, but they won't be big in numbers. This is a tough time to attract the Lebanese back home. I wish I had something else to say, but if I did, I'd be bullshitting you, Habib.
There is a question in the back over here. Give us your name, and if you promo, what promo are you from?
So thank you. My name is Michael Malouli, Promo 2012. So I was one of those brain exports, but I'm very appreciative of sort of the reform with the bylaws and the structural changes for the Amical. But I'm curious, what sort of practical changes would you want to see at the student level? Some of us here are involved in tech, and some people were to say, hey, this is the future. Is there any part of the strategy right now that focuses, in a more practical level on what you want to see the students be more proficient at, maybe as a means of making the country more attractive eventually?
Same tough question, that Habib asked. Frankly, the best thing that you could do for now, if you're living abroad and working abroad, is, acquire the, whatever expertise you've chosen to pursue, but try to give back something in the meantime to the country. The needs are immense. You can give back, forget about giving back money. This is very important, but leave it aside. You can give back by helping with your time, with your brains, some of those NGOs, organizations that are trying to make a difference. You can help by lobbying wherever you sit, if you're in a position to lobby countries or organizations to think of Lebanon differently, or to act with Lebanon differently. So there is a variety of ways by which you can contribute. Helping young entrepreneurs, being a sort of mentor or godfather to some of those budding entrepreneurs in Lebanon is a way to keep people, young people in the country. So choose, your area of likeness, and just spending some time with any of those organizations can make a hell of a difference, I think.
Anybody? Michel, Boud.
Boudi Sahyoun, 1984, Promotion. You have spoken a few times about resistance and lobbying. Resistance against what, and lobbying for what? We have lobbied for the last 30 years for things in Lebanon, and the target keeps changing. We don't know what to lobby for, and we don't know what to resist against. Can you give us some clarity on what to lobby for and what to resist against?
Yeah, actually, there are some people in the room here that could help a lot on this front. I can think of Georges Bitter, Paul Raphael, Habib Kairouz, and others that could help answer this question. Let me address the issue of resistance. The way we thought about it is there are, we need to defend the education system that we have. Again, if it were not for education, a big chunk of population, of the middle class population, would not be around. So defending private school viability is absolutely essential. Okay, I could go on with the details of the financial details of why this is the case, but the private schools are under threat in Lebanon financially. Their viability is under threat. So defending that is an absolute must. And I'm amazed that not enough politicians see what's happening and the writing on the wall if what has been planned continues. Cultural resistance is a must. I mean, recently, some of you may have, and it's a great thing that's happening. I don't know, and Claude Audi could talk about it. I don't know if you followed all the cultural events in Tripoli of the last month or two. Just amazing. I mean, many of us had not been in Tripoli for like 30, 40 years. I don't know about you, but if you're not from Tripoli, there is no reason why you would ever go to Tripoli these days. Well, for the better part of the last month, a flurry of cultural activity that's in the press all over the world, and it's the first time since, I think, in the 70s that something happened of this sort in Tripoli, if I'm not mistaken, Claude. So that's cultural resistance. I mean, when you think about everything else that's happening in the country, and some people are still trying to do cultural events in places that no one would think about, this is just amazing. And I'm always reminded of, I was asked recently, why did you get involved with this museum thing? I mean, surely there are more important things to do. And I stumbled on a quote from Churchill in the World War II years. He was asked by the État Major, by the generals, why are you still funding culture? We need all the money that we can get to put into the war. And the famous response by Churchill was, but why do you think, what are we fighting for? And so, culture is an absolutely essential part of positive resistance. So this is my answer on the resistance part. What can we lobby for? What can we lobby for? The lobby list, it would be a laundry list of things you would lobby for. I wouldn't know where to start, frankly. We could have a separate conversation on what needs to be fixed in Lebanon, and then I tell you this is what you need to lobby for. But that will be a big laundry list.
Do I see any hands? Okay.
Thank you.
Joe, thank
Merci.
you very much. It was wonderful. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks. No?